Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Crystal, if you could help me with the roll call, please.
Okay, Commissioner Aker,
Here.
Commissioner Hausman,
Here.
Commissioner Schultz. Here. Commissioner Krenke,
Here.
Commissioner Marek,
Here.
Commissioner Jahinski,
Here.
Mayor Adwell,
Present.
Scott Hussinger,
Present.
Amy Barrows. Present. Okay, and excused is Commissioner Cahalan.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, do we have a motion for the minutes or any adjustments or corrections?
I'll move to approve the minutes for July 26th.
I'll second.
All righty. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. All right, we're off to number 5, citizens' comments on consent agenda items. We have no consent agenda items, so we'll have no comments. We have no consent agenda. So we'll move on to number 7, public hearings. We have 2 of them. 7A, public hearing number 1, topic, text amendment to Article 1 and Article 2, excuse me, of the City of Delafield zoning ordinance. Location none, applicant City of Delafield Planning Commission. Matter, amend sections of Article 1 of the City of Delafield zoning ordinance, including Section 52-16D, yard projections, and Section 52-21, street assess requirements, and by amending the text of Article 3 of the City of Delafield zoning ordinance, including Section 52-89A through D, plans of operation, and possible other sections related to topics specified in this notice. Is there anyone that would like to speak to public hearing number 1? Going once, going twice. Public hearing number 1 is now closed. We'll move on to public hearing number 2, topic repeal and recreation of the text and official maps of the Chapter 16, Article 2 of the City of Delafield floodplain zoning ordinance. Location none. Applicant City of Delafield is required by Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and Federal Emergency Management Agency. Matter, repeal and recreate the text and official maps of the Chapter 16, Article 2 of the City of Delafield floodplain zoning ordinance in order to incorporate the most recent version of the model ordinance prepared by Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. The model ordinance incorporates the required minimum floodplain zoning standards of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, DNR. The list of official floodplain maps that is incorporated identifies FEMA map parcels and other studies approved by the DNR. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to public hearing number 2? Public hearing number 2. Going once, going twice. Public hearing number 2 is now closed. All right, we'll move on to number 8, citizen comments on items other than the consent agenda and public hearings. So if there's anybody here that would like to speak to anything on the agenda, now is your opportunity to do so. Is there anyone that would like to come up and speak? Anybody that wants to come up and speak? All right. Citizens' comments are now closed. Move on to number 9, unfinished business. We have none. Right into the agenda. 10, new business. 10A, DLC 0787088, 725 Milwaukee Street, owner VLC LLC, Daniel, help me. Nine Ice. Representative applicant Professional Consultant Incorporated, Chad Chemnitz. Representative applicant is requesting site plan and appearance review for facade improvements of the existing automobile repair and service building. Come on up, sir. If you could sit down and give us your name and address and hit the button so the light comes on, we'll be good. Yep.
Oh, lights up.
Nope, it's no.
Red is on. Okay, sorry. Chad Chemnitz, 300 Cottonwood Avenue, Heartland, Wisconsin.
Great. Amy, you want to give us an overview, please?
Sure. Okay, so this is the former auto repair shop that's owned by Al Wagner downtown on the north side of Milwaukee Street, just northeast of Oneida Street. The applicant's proposing to replace the windows and doors that you can see on Milwaukee Street. Right now, they are painted a white color. They're all going to be replaced and have a stained material. So the applicant, there is some imagery in the packets. You can see a picture of the existing building. It's also on the screen. And then these are, so he is, if you can see the text here where it says exposed window openings, the next picture shows the existing windows. He's going to take out those boards and expose the windows, but those windows will be replaced. And then he's going to use a stained material like in this picture. However, this picture on the screen is not the property, it's just what it will look like. And then tonight he dropped off hard copy pages, they're not in the packet, that shows what it will look like. There was just one error in the image. The right side will have the wood border like the left side. So that will match on both sides. Does that make, yeah. So really, the request is for site plan approval simply for the exterior modifications close to downtown. It is just outside of the downtown design district area, but it is still, you still have the right to review it for site plan approval, so it's really up to your discretion.
On one of those windows that are boarded up now, isn't the business sign on one of those?
There was a banner on there that we would take off and get rid of the, we don't need a sign on the building.
Okay,
We're not requesting a sign, so we'd open up those two window openings and put in a wood window that would be stained very similar to this color right here.
yeah, okay. I was just wondering about the sign.
No sign, no
Okay.
signage.
That does make me think of something though. So they don't have any signage on the property, however, this is a property that switched hands to the Boucher company, and so there was a business and owner entity change. We are going through that public hearing tonight to not require folks to come to Plan Commission. So I did let the applicant know, because he did just apply for the site plan approval, that we could approve that administratively.
So I just wanted to make a couple of comments about the building. It's a beautiful historic building, and we're really glad that you're fixing it up and making it more presented. The last owner, ran a similar business to what you guys are doing, which is, less, not too much involved with the customer. It's really an appointment-based thing, and you keep cars in there, I think, for an extended period of time. So it doesn't have a lot of activity, but this building is really cool down there. So I know you're giving us a rendering here of what the windows would look like, but hopefully we can maybe get a motion that staff can review the final window choice that you do decide to select, for the simple reason that I think it's important that we try to maintain the historical character down there. And a more modern window, I'd just like to be sure it's a historical, appropriate to the time period window. Double paned and all that sort of thing to be energy efficient and stuff, but you can get windows that, are appropriate for the time period. Would you have an objection to working with staff to get something that's appropriate to the time
I agree with
period?
that. That's our goal, is to make it look historical accurate, I guess.
Okay.
Best way to say it.
Yeah.
We're not trying to make it look modern.
Right.
That's why we're not, trying to put black windows or anything. Just
Okay.
a stained window we thought would be appropriate for the building.
Great. And so maybe if and when we get a motion to approve, we can put that staff review for historical accuracy of the window, possibly.
I think it looks great, so I'll make a motion to approve the site plan appearance update for the facade improvements for 725 Milwaukee Street, contingent upon staff final approval of the materials for the windows.
Second. Second.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
All right, thank
Great,
you.
welcome to the
All right.
city of Delafield.
Thank you.
This weekend you'll have a lot of classic cars out in front for the Delafield Lions Car Show, right? That's on Sunday, by the way. Okay, we'll move on to 10B, DLC 0793021002705 Genesee Street, Suite 110, owner 705 Genesee Street, LLC, applicant Bill Fremont, Brunch Delafield. Applicant is requesting approval of a business plan of operation for a restaurant business known as Brunch Delafield. Is the applicant here? Come on up. Oh yeah, there you are. Recognize you from the council meeting. If you just give us your name and address, then we'll have Amy give us an overview.
Stephanie Fremont. This is my husband, Bill Fremont. We live in Delafield, and we are looking to open Brunch Delafield in the grain building that's being constructed right now.
Sounds great. Amy, you want to give us an overview of
Sure.
city stuff?
So this is the first business plan of operation that we're getting in from the 705 Genesee Street building. I would assume they'll start rolling in. I believe the building is supposed to be somewhat ready by the end of the year for then build out by the tenants early 2024. So the applicants are proposing to utilize, let's see, I might have the north side of the corner building that's located at the intersection. It'll take up about 4,900 square feet. It's going to be the brunch. It's going to be a brunch and lunch restaurant named Brunch. Is it just brunch or, okay. Because I know there's some of the wording talks about Brunch It Up or Brunch Delafield, but I believe it'll go by brunch.
It'll go by Brunch. Brunch is been, so this is a franchise location. The franchise owner is actually here as well. Morgan Schnabel, she's founded Brunch, and there's a Brookfield and Milwaukee location, and then there's a newly franchised location in Cedarburg, so then this would be the second franchise location.
So in the packet, there was a very detailed operational plan. I'm not going to go over those specifics. They also supplied some interior schematics. The one thing to note about that, the interior schematics, and there's a picture of a building, are one of their other spaces. So it gives you an idea of what it will look like inside. They will not have this space completely designed out until the building is complete. The picture on the screen you see, this is not part of their application. I actually received a concept plan for signage. They're not proposing any signage at this time, but I wanted to include it. We'll discuss signage at next month's meeting because it does show the east facade of the building, and they're going to be occupying again this north side. And you can see the concrete slab. They will be having some outdoor seating on that slab. That was anticipated when you reviewed the building. It won't be in the way of the entrance or, it will not affect pedestrian traffic. So the outdoor seating should be acceptable and reasonable and was anticipated. They plan to be open 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. The CBD 1 district does not require any minimum parking for the use. The lower level is reserved for tenant spaces. It's my understanding that you can rent out those spaces as part of your use. I would anticipate you'll be doing that as part of the operation.
But those are not for public parking, to our understanding, is that correct?
That's what we understand. It'll just be for tenant and then like employees of the businesses.
Okay, so you have the same thought process. Some employees will be
Correct.
able to park there, but that's it.
Correct, and then they have over by the east building, they have parking spaces, like public parking spaces.
Yeah, the
Or
municipal
west-
lot.
Sorry, yeah, the west building, they're gonna have a lot over there.
Yeah,
And then there's the surface parking's open to.
yeah, public.
So again, they didn't propose signage yet, they'll have to come back for that. And then because it is a little bit preliminary with their application, and one reason why they came in early is because they need to reserve a liquor license. As you know, the city is already getting those reserves from adjacent communities, and so the city's working through that, and they did go to the council meeting last month. So just so that you know, if any changes are proposed that are significant, especially related to the exterior, you will need to come back for an amendment. So I would just say if you propose any changes, just let me know and then I can tell you whether or not you need to come back.
Okay.
Other than that, and then you need a restaurant license from the county. That would be a requirement before operating. That's about all. It's 7 to 3, 7 days a week.
And if you want to do any, generally there is no advertising allowed on the outside of the building or in the windows and so forth. But if there was something that you wanted to consider in the future, you'd have to come back here and get approval for anything that you'd want to put, even inside the windows that would be to the outside, just so you're aware.
Okay.
And then what we'll be doing, Hendrix is coming in, I believe, starting next month for a multi-tenant signage program. So some of those specifics will be laid out, and then when you come in for your signage, it'll have to comply with that signage program. Typically, it's maximum size, maybe font, maybe color. I mean, we don't know exactly what it's gonna end up looking like, but keep in touch with them, I guess, or me.
Okay.
I just had one question on your hours. I know it's just brunch, but we often encourage applicants to give you some wiggle room if needed, and I see you're closing at 3. Would there be special events you might have or anything like that where you might need to have a time later than 3? I guess we generally tell applicants, be broader than what you might anticipate needing as a routine, because things come up. Because if you want to have something that runs to 4 and we approve 3, technically you're in violation and we'll have to bring you back in here, right, if there's a complaint. So
Okay.
we just bring it up to, there's nothing, we're not going to keep, if you want to say 5 instead of 3, I don't think that's going to be a problem for the
Sure.
planning commission, or 8 for that matter.
Okay. 7 a.m. to midnight?
We could.
I mean, at this time, I mean, the primary hours are 7 to 3. I mean, as of the moment, there's no plans for any events, but if we, just for like the sake of this, if we need to put 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. with primary hours 7 to 3, like, do we put a caveat like that in there?
You could, yeah. I mean, what's our typical close? Usually like 9 or 10, I mean.
Well, no matter, if people want to stay open later than 9 or 10, they can't.
Right.
Just because there's no people. But, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. So like 9? Anybody have a problem with 9?
No.
Yeah, I think 9 o'clock would be a good idea. It doesn't mean you have to stay open, but just in case for some reason you're able to, it's there.
Sure. Okay. No, I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
So you want to amend the close time 7 days a week to 9 p.m.?
Correct.
Question, I'm sure it's in here. How much interior seating do you have? What's your capacity?
So that's up in the air right now. We're working with the contractors on the leasing and whatnot. Right now, we're at the 4,900 square feet. We might be going down. Morgan might know that better. Do you know what seating is?
It's going to vary. The architect and ultimately occupancy will tell us for sure what we can put in there. It will probably be about 100.
So you're going to have to come up and tell us your name and address.
Do you want me to?
Yeah. You're putting it on the record, so we need to know who you are.
Brought a chair.
You can
Morgan
bring a chair.
Schnabel. My address is 2495 Shelley Court in Brookfield. So yes, we anticipate around 100 people interior capacity, but that will be determined once the architect gets final occupancy.
Great.
Do you have any other questions for me that I can answer while I'm up here? Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So with that, I do have in here approving the business plan of operation as presented. No liquor can be sold until a liquor license is obtained. And outdoor dining shall not impede pedestrian traffic from accessing the building on the east side of the property. And then the motion should also include hours 7 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Was it 7 a.m. or was it a different number in there?
7 a.m.
It was 7 a.m.? Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve business plan of operation as laid out here in the packet, with the change of hours of operation to be 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. No liquor license, no liquor can be sold until a liquor license is obtained. Outdoor dining shall not impede pedestrian traffic from accessing the building on the east side of the property.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. You're ready to go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Grab a hammer and help them put up the walls.
Okay, we'll move on to 10C, DLC 075598522029, Evergreen Lane, owner J.C. Warner and Kristen M. Warner, Living Trust. Applicant Matthew Widman, Precision Construction LLC. Applicant is requesting approval to remodel an existing boathouse and a after-the-fact approval for the installation of the folding doors on the lakeside of the boathouse. There you go, you're here. If you can just give us your names and addresses.
Both mics are off. Matthew Widman, 1925 North Oak Grove Road, Oconomowoc.
Kristen Warner, W284 and 3865 North Shore Court in Pewaukee, along with 2029 Evergreen Lane in Heartland.
Great. Amy, you want to give us an overview?
Okay, so this property is on the east shore of the lake. They have currently an existing home, detached garage, and a boathouse. They did propose minor improvements to the boathouse, and they were told that they did not need to come through the committee for review and approval. However, the roof sustained some water damage, and so as part of that, they were proposing additional improvements. And with the roof damage itself, they were asked to come to Lake Welfare and Plan Commission for approval. As part of that Lake Welfare meeting in June, they did approve the improvements, which included at that time the relocation of stairs to the south side of the property, new LP smart siding and windows, a new service door, new overhangs, 3 new downcast lights on the lakeside, a new roof, and a new cable railing. And Lake Welfare did recommend approval of those improvements. But after the meeting, so as part of the elevations that were submitted to Lake Welfare, the lakeside door was shown as an overhead door. The applicants were also notified that they needed to keep the overhead door. They did attempt to return a door that they had already ordered, but because they couldn't, they decided to put those folding aluminum glass doors up, so they are out on the property currently. So they had to go back to Lake Welfare because of that, and they went back in just this last month, and Lake Welfare did approve the original, because it hasn't come to Plan Commission, they did approve the other improvements, but did not approve the folding doors, so they did tell them that they needed to go back to the original approval. And then just as a reminder, because we don't get a lot of boathouses, Lake Welfare Committee provides a recommendation to the Plan Commission, and then the Plan Commission is required to look at the location, architectural design, color, material, and ensure that it's compatible with the principal structure. Make sure there's rainwater remediation if necessary. These improvements do not trigger that because they're not modifying the boathouse to a certain extent. They have to look at the buildings on adjacent properties, the lakeshore setting, and any neighbors' comments and Lake Welfare Committee recommendations. And then specific consideration should be given to the visual impact of the boathouse from the lake and to any obstruction by the boathouse to an adjacent owner's view of the lake. So in general, the improvements out here are pretty minor. The staircase that was relocated to the south is closer to the south lot line, but it does meet all of the setback requirements. The boathouse meets the setback or all of the dimensional standards in general. There is a patio that is adjacent to the boathouse that was pre-existing, so that does not require special approval. However, the door that the applicants did put in, there has been a precedent set by the Lake Welfare Committee historically to require an overhead door. And part of that comes from the definition of the zoning code that requires a garage type door. The idea here is that the boathouses are intended to be used for boat storage and boat equipment storage. And once you start getting fancy like this, the use comes into question. So it helps control that. So we got precedent You also have the ability to review architectural design of the structure and then the definition of a boathouse are all reasons to consider whether or not that door is appropriate. So the recommendation written in the report is to approve the improvement subject to building and electrical permits if necessary prior to commencing any construction. They have started construction, so they'll just need to follow through with Scott and make sure they have all their appropriate permits. No plumbing was proposed, so if plumbing is proposed in the future, the matter would require review and a recommendation from the Lake Welfare Committee and review and approval by Plan Commission. And then illumination from the lighting shall not extend beyond the property boundaries and shall only produce downcast light. And then the optional condition being that the lake side door shall be removed and replaced with an overhead retractable door as recommended by Lake Welfare. And I believe in the packet there is for some reason, there's pictures, I think, of another site, so disregard those, but there is a picture of the boathouse. There it is. Oh, it's not on the screen. Mike, can you put my packet on the screen? So that's the lakeside. Other than that, this is a repurposed boathouse, so it was pre-existing.
So it's not a boathouse.
Well, it's the style of the door and whether or not you're considering it a garage type door would, that's a design feature of the boathouse.
But is it being used as a boathouse or boat equipment storage?
Well, it's required to be,
Yes.
so I can't answer
Even by
that.
state statutes.
We do have some pictures from how the boathouse used to be when they purchased it. That was completely finished as a living space, and they are actually using it more now as a boat storage, tube storage. And the door does completely open. Once it's all the way open, it is a 17-foot opening. It's 8 feet tall. It's actually a bigger opening.
Storing a boat or water vehicle in it, or water equipment.
Oh, you carry it into the, I brought some pictures here. Just a few things. Unfortunately, it didn't get on because I sent it a little too late, so it's all right. I'll hand these out to everybody so they can see.
And just remind everybody that the Lake Welfare Committee's vote was unanimous to ask for the doors to be removed and replaced with what they approved on their plans, which was an overhead door. Thank you.
Amy, so the pictures that Scott went and took that are attached.
I have not been out to the boathouse.
This one.
I have
These
not.
pictures are from the applicant provided these pictures.
Right, but the pictures that were in the packet.
The applicant provided those pictures.
Okay, is
So
that,
the ones from the shore of the white colored, yeah, the applicants provided those.
okay.
If you briefly look over the pictures, there's obviously you can see the door that's fully open. They're storing, there's tubes in there. There's all water, sports activities stuff. Compared to the way it used to be, there's a bar room in there, a TV, all kinds of more, living where people would actually live in a boathouse.
Correct. We were thrilled to be able to purchase this home last summer, and a lot of the previous owners left things or sold things as is. And while that was amazing for the bunk beds and the dining room table in the house, when we got to the boathouse, it was not at all what a boathouse should be. We previously owned a lake home on Wind Lake in Muskego area, and we know the importance of the boathouse because we have those great big tubes that need to come in and out. We have the floaties, we have the paddle boards, we have all of those things that require a large opening on the lakeside to get things in and out appropriately. When we had our home inspection done, our home inspector flagged the doors that were on the lakeside of the boathouse as unsafe, and so we knew that we needed to do something about those right away. So safety, the size of the opening, and also the flexibility of the interior storage to store those large lake items were our primary drivers when we purchased that door and expanded that opening so that it was more functional for lake equipment.
The concern that I read from the Lake Welfare Committee, which I think is a valid one, and you're hearing it tonight, about the code saying that it has to be solely for the purpose of storage of boat. We could debate about boating and so forth. But I do notice that you have a permanent pier you installed, which from my observation, make it almost impossible to put a traditional boat in there without getting out of the boat, getting into the water, et cetera. And I think it's that kind of realm of what is this, a boathouse or is it something else, that is of a concern to the Lake Welfare Committee, and I think probably some of the people, including myself, on the committee.
Okay, so I appreciate your concerns and certainly appreciate your recommendations. However, I'm wondering for the code piece, the justification for those recommendations, because the code says it's a garage type door, which a bifold door is. And this opening is providing for much more opportunity to store those large lake-type things. If you've ever tried to roll one of those big towable sombreros or a four-person bandwagon tube into a small opening, it's very challenging. So this allows for much easier access of all of those lake things that need to be stored within a boathouse.
So Mike, you're the Lake Welfare Committee Chairman. Are you going to plan on making some comments based on Lake Welfare Committee's discussions and stuff? Because the rest of the members here don't have the privilege of being at that meeting like that you were at, and I happened to be at that night too.
I'm not sure it's a privilege, but yeah, so a couple things. One is the Warners came to us and they tried to return the door and they couldn't because it's custom made. While we don't want to see them go through a financial hardship, this is the kind of, this is just the beginning. The next topic tonight is going to be the same thing, these doors. So when we discussed it at Lake Welfare, the question really was, are these boathouses boathouses? I mean, would you put what I think is approximately a $40,000 door on a boathouse that you're going to keep boats and kayaks in? Does it need to be fully glass? The sense was, no, not really. And it continues from there, and this isn't just them, it's this notion that if we stand by this belief that a boathouse is meant for boats, it seems to be common knowledge in the city that you just kind of go through the framing of a boathouse and then get through the initial steps, and then you build a living room in it. I mean, you can go around the lake and see where these property owners have built residences in these lake houses. And that's not the intent. And I'm not accusing you of doing that at all, but I'm just saying this is just where this whole process has started. So the Lake Welfare Committee was unanimous in the belief that these kinds of doors shouldn't be allowed. And when we get to the next step of going through the boathouse checklist and refining the ordinances, we'll talk more about that. But the fact is that's not indicative of a utility building, which is really what a boathouse is supposed to be.
And that's why when we had all of the mold and rot that was discovered from the top of the boathouse that had been leaking, we asked Precise Construction to remove all of the wood, because that's not appropriate for a boathouse, and have complete tile, floor to ceiling, all over the floors as well, and every surface in there as watertight, because a boathouse is to store things that are used on the lake. And I always say, if you're taking something in there that isn't wet, you haven't had a good enough day on the lake. It should be stored things that have been used on the lake, which is why we made those interior decisions that were certainly not planned, but became necessary. And so I think that while, again, I appreciate the recommendations, I'm wondering where to find the justification for those within our city's codes.
Have either or both of you owned and lived on lakes in the past?
I have, yes. This is our second lake property.
I'll just comment that nothing attracts attention more than somebody wielding a hammer or a building permit on a lake. And nobody polices a lake more militantly than fellow lake owners. I mean, they get in their pontoon boat after they've skied all day and they drive around the lake. It's like, oh, look, what's going on here? And so it'd be hard for me to believe that you wouldn't understand the sensitivity of requirements of permits and authorization to get things done as far as maintenance and update of a boathouse. In particular, I've seen people with fully constructed boathouses ending up needing to raise them because they were 2 feet over their neighbor's easement or something like that. And so, I mean, and different thing I understand, I'm not a lake property owner. I know several of them. I'd rather use the lake than live on it most of the time because of some of these issues. But in my tenure on the council and on Plan Commission, when I have actually reached out and participated in several lake issues and made suggestions, I end up with a litany of experts telling me, well, but have you considered this, have you considered that? And so it's been my position to hold the experts' opinions at heart, and we had expert recommendations sent our way. And as far as diving into the code, as far as our rationale, I trust the code and I trust Lake Welfare's interpretation of it, in particular with the other issues that Mike was saying might come after this and might encourage a different kind of behavior that's already occurring without knocking down some of these walls. So I'm extremely prone to go along with the people that are living this life on Lake Welfare and have to deal with these issues on a day-to-day basis. That's why they take first look at these before we get them, because we've got a couple public hearings where we're fine-tuning things on interior properties that would apply to any place in the city, but in particular with lake properties, I lean on Lake Welfare pretty hard. So that's just where I'm coming from when I look at trying to bend rules around what their recommendations are.
I'd like to say one thing on that. I didn't bend any rules. I actually reached out to Mike, and I have all email correspondence with him as far as, hey, what do I need? What do I need to do? What process do I need to follow? And he led me in the direction of, I told him I was doing windows, doors, and siding. He said that he didn't say anything about having to come in front of the welfare committee. Only time the welfare committee came up is when I actually asked to move the stairs. So at that point, that was actually a month after all my email correspondence with him, that the door was already ordered. So I tried to follow every rule possible. I reached out to Scott, I reached out to Mike, and then I was a little confused with the whole process anyways, because why am I at the Plan Commission now when I should have been at the Plan Commission back before I got my permit?
I believe the process goes through Lake Welfare before it comes to us in any regard.
Well, but it's supposed to come to you before I get a permit, and it never did.
Yeah, so that's why you're going through the process now, and that's why you're here today,
We're going through
to make
it
sure
again.
we're going that direction.
Okay.
One comment I just want to share, a couple people made on the Lake Welfare Committee about, because there was a question about should there even be glass overhead doors? And the statement that seemed universal across them as well was that why would people want to see, why would you want people on the lake to see your stored junk inside your boathouse? That glass windows, or lots of glass windows, are there for people that are inside to see out. You know, that's the only reason why you would want to have glass windows on a boathouse door, whether it's up and down or side by side. So their preference is that, you know, normal glass windows that you might see, the small ones in a typical garage door, they would be okay with, but even up and down overhead doors, they wouldn't be happy with approving glass doors. So I just wanted to share that with you, that was a predominant discussion at the Lake Welfare Committee as well.
I agree.
So is the justification for not, for the recommendation aesthetics? Is it functionality? I'm just trying to understand a little bit more clearly the justification for the recommendation.
that there's no rationale. When what Ken kind of explained it, you're putting in a very, very expensive garage door for the purpose of not for people to see in, it's to see out. So
I also chose board and batten siding, which is more expensive than traditional sideways siding.
It's a functionality issue, though. If it's an all glass,
So the functionality is the justification?
we pay a premium for looking at the lake, right? That's true. Okay, so if you're looking through glass from a boathouse, the implication makes sense. You're looking at the lake from inside the boathouse. Why else would you want a glass door? And the extent of what are you using the boathouse for? If the things that are going to be in the boathouse are boats and kayaks, they don't need to see the lake. So the intent would be you're spending extra money so that you're going to spend time in that boathouse. That's the only rationale for why you'd use a door like that.
Another way of looking at it is, would you put glass doors on your garage doors?
Yes.
Yes, actually. And there's some.
Any person who is concerned about burglaries, break-ins, vandalism would never do that. Never. And I live in Delafield and have for 50 years, and I would never do that.
I respect your opinion.
So the Plan Commission does have the authority to review architectural design. That's part of the reason why these matters come through a committee, is to provide that discretionary review, and why, these types of improvements require approval from Lake Welfare and Plan Commission.
And Lake Welfare has that same power. And one of the things that, just to give you an example, that they look at with every boathouse that comes, whether it's a modification or a new boathouse, is they want it to match the existing house, primary structure, right? So that's like the first thing on the list is if, are your changes going to match what you have there? They want some, continuity between the two buildings. And that's purely architecture.
I'm always a little, this is kind of mysterious to me. I spent my summers on Pike Lake, and only people who were affluent had boathouses. They all had solid doors, but they were wet docks where you pulled in on the lake into the boathouse.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, why glass doors? Why would you want to look at that? Why would you want somebody else to look at that?
Yeah.
Just for security reasons.
But then again, why not? If you're proud of what you have and you want people to see it.
It's
a
the
personal
ordinance.
opinion.
It's a state statute and an ordinance that we're trying to follow. If we don't follow that, then why are we even here? We could just let everybody do whatever they want. But the idea behind Plan Commission and ordinances and state statutes is to see that everything is done orderly in the process, and that everybody does the same thing. By you doing this, it sets precedence before you know it, everybody's doing it. Sir?
I think that maybe another way to think about this, and I think this is what you're hearing, is if you take a plain reading of the statute, is that a boathouse is for the sole purpose of storing boat and equipment. And over time, people have pushed the envelope such that, exaggerate for effect, that people are turning boathouses into living rooms and dens. And you can take an extreme view on that and say if somebody came here and wanted to build a living room or a den 2 feet from the water line, I mean, it'd be a quick no. And the concern is that these kinds of facilities, like the one that you are building out, are starting to move in that direction. And the garage door is a mechanism that says this is really related to a boathouse versus glass doors. And that's the importance in it that you're hearing.
I understand what you're saying, and ironically, absolute reverse is true in this instance, because when we purchased the home, there were overhead doors that were deemed unsafe by our inspector. However, that's a side note. And inside of the boathouse was a wooden bar, teak furniture
What
with
happens
soft
under the radar,
cushions. And
we can't control.
well, I understand that, but what I'm sharing with you is what was there when I arrived and what we have changed it to become. It's a shower. It is 100% on the inside, lined with tile, floor to ceiling, floor to floor, side to side, and the opening is larger. The purpose and the drivers for us to select the door that we did were safety, first and foremost, the size of the opening to allow for those large water things to get in and out easily from the water side, and the interior storage options that having a bifold door allows for, instead of limiting the height of things that you're storing in there, since tubes and kayaks and paddleboards definitely have height considerations and the need to have some airflow behind them instead of stacked on the ground.
All right, any other questions for the applicant? Otherwise,
And
I
I
think
think it
we're
would only
looking.
be fair if we could let the fellow neighbors speak on their behalf before a final decision is made, so you can at least hear their story and not.
Yeah, we take them one by one, so we're gonna there'll be a motion, we'll vote on that motion, and then we'll move on to the next applicant.
Okay.
I would also like to say that I think for some reason what other people have chosen to do is influencing some opinions about our choices and what we have chosen to do. And I think that nothing has changed in the codes. They are the same that they are for the stack of people as we toured around the lake to see what other people do on this lake, what has been here. And we hired a professional company to do this. This is Matt's job. This is what he does. And we have abided by the codes that the city of Delafield has set, and that our contractor has taken care to follow as well.
I can't say enough as I try to follow every rule. I reached out to Mike about the windows and doors. He never said anything. And I read through all the zoning codes, and I didn't see anything in there, defining exactly what a garage type door is. Being a contractor for 35 years, I've installed so many different kinds of garage doors, pivoting doors, sliding doors, glass, solid, all different. And I just didn't see anything to think beyond, what I asked Mike's opinion for, Scott and Mike's opinion on what I need to do to get this process to move through. And now we're back here trying to figure out why this door is illegal in your eyes, or you guys don't want it, when it doesn't say really anywhere on why we cannot have this door.
To be clear, when Matt came to me and explained the actual door you were putting on the lakeside, I told him, do not present it to Lake Welfare because it won't be approved. That was plain and simple. As soon as I was made aware of that was the type of door, I told Matt, no, don't present it, it's not going to work. And he didn't present it. So if you had, and I realize it's after the fact, but if you had stuck with the permitted building, everything else was approved. The door is the issue.
You are correct about that, but this is 2 months after I talked to you and asked you on the permissions I need to take and what processes I need to do to get this permit. I mean, just to get approval to do the siding. At that time, I wasn't even having to get a permit or anything.
As I said, if you had adhered to the permit that was given to you, it wouldn't have been an issue. If you had presented that door at the Lake Welfare meeting, it would not have been approved. That was the first time I heard about the glass door, was when Matt brought it to me before the Lake Welfare meeting.
But if I wouldn't have moved the stairs, I wouldn't have had to get a permit, according to your eyes.
Then you would have been, well, no. When Matt explained this to me to begin with, he said, well, we're really not making, it's all cosmetic. We're really not making any changes. But then when he suggested removing the stairs, I checked with Scott to make sure, hey, is this going to require a permit? And he said yes. So that's where it started. And then you made more changes, obviously ran into some problems. And along the way, you would ask, okay, well, we're going to go through the process. That's fine. But when the door in question is really what's at issue here. When that was brought up, absolutely not. That's what I told Matt. Very clear
I
about
sent
that.
you an email on March 23rd stating the fact we're doing all new doors and windows, and you said nothing to me.
Again, what is in your permit?
The permit wasn't needed because you didn't say I needed to get a permit for that. I understand, yes, I got a permit 2 months after that because I asked to move the stairs. And at that time, you asked me to make sure I have all the information on there that we were doing to the boathouse.
obviously, it's confusing to you as to what has to go through the process. The way it started in talking to your builder, you weren't doing much. So it didn't think it was a big deal. Well, obviously, it progressed to a lot more, which then forced it to go through the entire lake welfare process and then plan commission. I'm sorry you end up with a situation with, you can't return the door, but the door was not approved. And that's the question here tonight.
So just per the code, any repair, remodeling, or replacement does require committee approval. And the idea is to look at the change in the appearance of the structure and the architectural design are two, that's part of what you need to be reviewing.
All right, anybody gonna give a crack at a motion?
I'll make a motion to deny that the correct overhead door needs to be replacing these bifold doors.
So remove existing bifold door and replace with overhead
Correct.
door on the plans with no glass?
With no what?
No glass?
Small glass near the top of the door is fine.
I did want to clarify too on the plans that were.
Oh, we're done, we're into the
Oh,
motion.
I'm sorry.
phase
There was
now.
existing, it didn't say overhead door, however, on the plans that were approved. It said existing door. And at the time, the doors were gone. They were a safety hazard.
I appreciate the comments, but we've moved into this section where you're not allowed to speak anymore. So a motion's been made. Do you need any clarification on the
Can I
motion?
get a clarification on
Yep.
it? Because I've got just to remove the existing bifold door and replace with
Need your mic up.
a door with small glass above.
That would be allowed. Overhead door.
Overhead door?
Can you just provide your reasoning for that for the record?
Per Lake Welfare's recommendation, and the fact that this was not, the old structure had 2 overhead doors. You're going from 2 overhead doors to 1 large. That should have been a permit, that's a change right there, and it should have came before us, and it didn't. But I feel that the overhead doors, having overhead doors, and having something that is more of a door than all glass is much more in line with other boathouses on the lake and what it should be, what the state statute and everything else says. So,
Okay, you got that clarification? Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. You can work with Scott moving forward on the process. Done with the Lake Welfare Committee and the Planning Commission. Back to Scott. Okay, we'll move on to 10D DLC 0783006 1425 Weber Court owner. How do I say that again?
Last name?
Majavy, thank you. Family Trust, date March 10th, 2020. Applicant Pat Seegers. Ascent LLC. Applicant is requesting approval to modify overhead doors to folding doors on the lake side of the boathouse. Does the applicant want to come on up? And if you can state your name and address.
I'm Phil Remmers. My address is 815 Crestwood Drive in Waukesha, Wisconsin. I'm the attorney from Majavy's Trust. So you guys didn't leave me a whole lot to work with.
So we're going to let the planner give a little overview, and then we'll let you do your thing.
Hold on, first I'm gonna go to the right page. Okay, so this property's on the east shore of Lake Nagawicca. The property does, well, I shouldn't say does, but it does. There's a new residence and boathouse under construction. I don't know if the residence is completed at this point. So they are still under construction. The applicant did come through Lake Welfare and Plan Commission in 2022 for a boathouse, so it is a new structure. And that was approved. That approval did include the overhead doors. And now they are proposing the glass aluminum folding doors similar to the previous applicant's proposal. I will just show you a plan. So this is the, on the screen, the plan set of the approved boathouse, which does show the overhead door on the bottom right, if you can see it. I can zoom in a little bit. The boathouse, so the boathouse it's up, but the doors are not installed yet. So they do have a majority of the structure is complete. These are the folding doors that are being proposed, and then you can see the building plan that shows the new proposed folding doors. So again, I'm not going to repeat myself, but the staff report does provide the same information and explanation for why Plan Commission reviews this, and that Lake Welfare provides a recommendation to Plan Commission. In this case, Lake Welfare did consider the applicant's request to modify their approval on August 9th, and the committee recommended that the previous plan for the boathouse be recognized and adhered to, and that the boathouse doors be installed as approved, the original approval, and that the Centaur folding aluminum doors may not be installed, and the change is denied for putting in the boathouse doors as requested. So again, I leave this at your discretion, but that it's recommended that you be consistent with the approval of other boathouses.
Okay.
Again, I don't think you left me a whole lot to work with. I have to reiterate just a couple of the points made by the previous people. You know, if I look at the ordinance, I mean, it says specific consideration shall be given to the visual impact. And, you know, styles change over time. Engineering's change. You know, we didn't have the availability of these other types of doors. And so now there's different ways that we can have garage doors. If we're looking at the visual impact and the aesthetics, and we're looking at that from the lake, I think most of us would agree that it looks a lot nicer to have these type of Centaur, these type of folding doors, rather than having the traditional, you know, garage door. The traditional garage door is what was available in the past. There's more options now. Specifically, a lot of the reasons that they want to put this door in, they have the same type of door in their house, and so they have the same type of door in their house. They want this to match. The ordinance says that too. I mean, that the materials should be the same, the architectural design should be the same. We want that consistency throughout. We have the same type of consistency with the sidings. We have the same type of colors. We have this, we want to have the same type of doors. The functionality works the same. It actually works better. I mean, obviously, when you have an overhead door, it kind of limits, space over and above. We want to have more availability to be able to store things. I can't remember, when you say, well, do people park these boats in there? I don't even know if that's possible anymore. I think you have to have, a ramp system that a lot of times it's just not allowed anymore. So no, it doesn't become normal boat storage. It becomes kayaks and tubes and life jackets and those sorts of things, so that you can have them, be dried out, that they don't have to be, stored, on the boat where it creates mildew and that sort of thing. I guess I would also make the point, you could say, well, the only reason people would want to put these doors in there is because they want to use it for, something else. I don't think that's true. I think people make decisions all the time with regard to their homes, that sometimes I give up privacy, even in my own home, to get a certain look, because I want that look. I think it looks better, and so I make that decision for that. So I guess what I'd like to do is, just ask you again to kind of reconsider that, this is being considered, consistent. We are making, the same type of designs, the same color, the same aesthetics. We want it to look the best we can. We think that this looks better coming from the lake than just putting a traditional aluminum, garage door on it. Again, engineering, changes, styles change. We want to be kind of more with the local styles.
So I guess two things. Number one, I agree with the aesthetics, but when you're looking from the lakeside at the house, and if you truly stock your boathouse full of stuff and it's a glass door, that's not as attractive looking. But probably a better point is, because I asked, somebody else from Ascent came in here and said, these types of doors are being put on the house. To me, that makes it a people door, not a boat door. It's like, if you're going to spend the money to put that kind of a door on the house, which is probably going to look gorgeous, how the functionality is then the same. So you're basically, it's a people door is what I would look at that as.
All doors have the same functionality. I mean, to get things in and out of a place, whether that's a person, whether that's kayaks, whatnot. Well, what we want to do is we want to have that consistency. And I don't think the decision should be based on whether you think that people are spending too much money on the doors. It's like, no, we think that you should use a cheap door. I'm not sure that that's the function of the planning commission or even the welfare committee to make a decision on how people should be spending their money. I understand that you get to make the decision, on appearances and those sorts of things, but to say, well, that's too expensive a door for a boathouse, I don't think that's the criteria. I think the criteria, as it's in the ordinance, is it consistent? Is the aesthetics good? Whether, people can see into the boathouse when it's dark, and if they, go up there and they look at it and they can see some of those types of things in there. I don't think you can see that from the boat. I mean, if the boathouse is shut and it's dark, they're not going to be able to see that. Same thing with my garage at home. And if people want to go in there and look into my window, my garage door, or look into the windows on the side of my house, I mean, there's no reason to have a window in my garage. The reason I have it is because it looks nice from the outside. It's a better look. This is a better look. This is why they'd like to have it.
I agree with your point about equating expense to whether it's appropriate or not, and I don't think that's necessarily the point that's trying to be made up here. But yeah, Florida ceiling glass to look into a storage facility does not lend itself to aesthetics. I mean, it's not, especially on a lake. When you're 100 feet away, yeah, the glare in the sun's going to come at different angles. You're not going to be able to see in. When you're 15 feet off, paddleboarding by or whatever, you'd rather see, something that matches the siding. Or, you mentioned that these types of doors didn't exist in the past, and I think they have existed for a long time in different forms. A lot of boathouses used to have, and some new ones now do. They're on wheels like old barn doors, and they slide way open. It's very practical and aesthetically pleasing. But I think one of the big concerns, I'm fairly confident one of the big concerns with the type of door, the type of use, the type of access that is being displaced when people are remodeling houses is that we're displacing the utilitarian aspect of it, which keeps clutter off of the shoreline, and people outside, on their patio chairs or whatever. And instead we end up with people inside and all the clutter on the shoreline, which is really the utilitarian purpose of a boathouse, is to have that access primarily for that type of equipment, and not to put it on display like a museum, but to put it away so people don't see it, and that's why they exist. I'm very likely to continue my streak and deal with the experts on lake welfare as far as how they've dealt with these issues in the past, and it's a tough battle. They're trying to maintain a standard, and I think they do a good job policing that, and I'm in their corner on doing it, and I think it's a reasonable ask that in at least this case as well, that the original plan be adhered to, which was approved in consideration of the harmony that the entire plan presented from day one.
And I would just add, you had mentioned height. From my perspective, one of the longest things you'll put in a boathouse is a paddleboard, and those tend to be hung up, from the walls on a horizontal basis. So I don't think an overhead garage door, which does often impede a foot or so, would really have any bearing. You're likely still going to have 8 or 9 feet of clearance. I agree with Tim's comments. I'll just add on the cost, because I don't know if I heard where that came from, but I suspect if you put in a Brazilian cherry overhead door, there would be no objections, and that might cost as much. And you might also be able to find some looks that do complement the rest of the house as well with an overhead door.
And I'm sure that's the case, but I don't really know if that's the point. I mean, the point is this is what they choose to put in there, and I don't think it's, we should be saying, well, if you can only put in this type of thing, we would like a different style. As long as it's consistent, it's aesthetically pleasing, it's the functionality is there. I believe that's what should be, the criteria, and the fact that, some people may believe that it could be used for something else. Again, that's not the criteria. The criteria is whether it's a garage-type door, that it can be used for that, and that it has the same aesthetics, it has the same functionality. This is what it does. And I think to be putting those, all these hidden agendas in there that, well, if you want to spend money, I'll give you a suggestion on how to spend that money. If you want to hang your paddle boards a certain way, I'll give a suggestion on how to hang the paddle boards. I don't think that's the point. I think we need to look at the ordinance. We should stick with the ordinance. And I think the ordinance says that this should be.
Yeah, and I'll weigh in too, from a consistency standpoint. If you were present earlier in the meeting, we had something as simple as a facade update to a not a gas station, automotive repair and storage facility that's just right around the corner. Great care was taken into recommending not just, hey, the plan looks good, let's go. It's to follow up with staff to see the actual, the final design, and it's to maintain a certain consistency from an architectural and aesthetic standpoint, not just on lake. We're not picking on lake. It's citywide. We take that care with any kind of plan that comes our way, and so we look at both things. And I don't think, from a consistency standpoint, that Lake Welfare is being inconsistent in their recommendations. I think they're being extremely consistent, and if there was 8 more of these types of doors out on the lake, I think they'd be on really weak ground. And I think they're trying to fight their battle to say, we want the lake to kind of look the way the lake has looked, and that comes part and parcel with buying into this community. And that's a standard that we get to uphold. Sometimes it seems like we're trying to decorate the city, and I say that's the worst part of my job as an alderperson, but consistency helps me sleep at night, and I think we're being consistent.
Fair enough.
All right. Anybody interested in making a motion? Laura already did one.
No.
Ed, you did
yeah.
one.
I'll make a motion to deny the applicant seeking to put in the Centaur door system and to keep the overhead door system that was previously approved.
I'll second.
I'm just going to ask, with any denial, I think it's important to put in the record the reasoning for it. So
Right.
if you have the same reasons as the previous applicant,
Yeah, the reason I'll give is we're following recommendations by Lake Welfare Committee to maintain consistency throughout the lake properties.
I second that.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming. Better do it now than after they're installed. Okay, we'll move on to 11, Comprehensive Plan Zoning and Ordinance Revision A. Did I skip one?
Yeah.
I missed E. Oh, sorry.
And it's
John?
Give them a heart attack.
10E DLC 080798502223660 Kettle Court East, owner Pine Brush LLC, care of David Schill and Nick Mallinger. Applicant John Kuntz, MSI General. Applicant is seeking feedback regarding a concept presentation to construct in addition to an existing building that manufactures a variety of brushes. Welcome back. All by yourself today?
By myself.
All right, Amy, can you give us your name and address, please?
Nope, it's off now. Turn it again. There you go. Red is on.
Red is on, got it. John Coots, MSI General, PO Box 7, Oconomowoc, Wisconsin.
All right, Amy, tell us what we need to know.
Okay, so the property's on the south side of Kettle Court East, sandwiched between the Candy Building and the Boat Storage Repair Building. It does include manufacturing of brushes. It's been around for many years. Just in 2020, they proposed a small addition on the east side. You can actually see it on the aerial photo with the different coloring a little bit. And that also included the combination of 2 parcels. So this parking lot on the east side was part of a separate parcel that got combined with the structure. At the time in 2020, they did anticipate a future addition. However, it wasn't reviewed for approval. So now they're proposing an addition that's 26,534 square feet. The total square footage of the building would be 84,895 square feet, and then they'll need to modify the parking accordingly. The application also does say that they're storing pallets on the back side of the building, and we'll come back to that because I'm not sure where that's being proposed. They are, let's see if I can find site plan here. Can you see that? It's a little hard to see. But they are proposing to they need to flatten out a slope on the east and south sides of the property so it gets pretty steep. So I don't know if you can tell, but there's a thick black line that runs across the south side of the addition and then along the entire east lot line that stops just about 3.5 feet short of the road. That is a long retaining wall in order to hold back the slope, so the exposed side of the wall would face the subject property. So it'll be the low side. The tallest point of the wall is 13.5 feet tall, so that the engineering staff is reviewing that, and it is rather significant. Any retaining wall within the road setback, which the road setback's 50 feet here, and it'll be 3.5 feet, and higher than 3 feet in height requires plan commission approval, which you can do as part of the site plan review. As part of that, you do need to determine whether the difference in grade between the lots is better controlled by the retaining wall. In order to do this addition the way they're proposing it, I don't believe there's really any other option to control the slope. Within the setback area, the terrain makes a slope to the road impractical, and the plans shall show that the wall will be structurally sound and so constructed that it will properly contain and support the ground and pavements, walks, and other nearby structures. So with future plans, we would want some engineering done to show that it will be stable. And I don't think I pointed out, this is a concept presentation, it's not their formal application. So we're at step 1. And the location and height shall be harmonious with the principal structure, so we'll want to see a rendering of what that wall's going to look like, if some kind of colored rendering. And then adjacent properties do need to be notified as well. So we would just require notification of the property to the east and south for that. They're also proposing to relocate an existing dumpster to the south side of the property. They would need to show some kind of, I don't have any imagery of what that looks like, so they'll need to submit a picture with their next submittal. We're going to want to make sure, I know it's pretty hidden, but that it's completely enclosed and attractive. And then the building, as proposed in addition, does comply with all of the dimensional standards. There's a table in the packet that shows how they're meeting those requirements. Parking, on the other hand, they're proposing 116 stalls, including the existing and proposed stalls, based on the uses. So required parking is based on the square footage of each use. They have a combination of manufacturing, warehouse, and office uses. They are required to have 153 spaces. So they do need to find a way to either comply with that, or they can show where they could add additional parking. And the Plan Commission can waive the parking, but it has to be in green space. And at this point, the site's very tight the way it is, and that would probably be hard to do. There's also an option to allow parking within 400 feet of the site with approval of the off-site park, or property owner, Mike. If they do that, then we would need to make sure whatever parking they use, that those folks comply with their own parking requirements. The new access is less than 24 feet in width, so an access drive has to be 24 feet in width. This was approved at 20 feet in width for the last approval because it's one-way traffic. I would just ask that if they're going to continue the one-way traffic, that they submit a plan for formal approval that shows how the flow of traffic, and then do something on site to make sure people explain to the Plan Commission how you're going to show on site that it has to be one-way traffic, whether it's line striping or signage. Architectural. They did submit some renderings of the building, so the idea is to have it match up with the existing structure. The existing structure is 22 feet in height. You can see that the proposed addition on this bottom picture will be a little bit taller. It'll be 32 feet, 32 feet and 3.5 inches. It does comply with the ordinance requirements. There'll be several windows on the north and east side elevations, and then some smaller windows on the south side that isn't visible to anyone. That would continue to allow light to penetrate, but that would be the primary purpose on the south side. There'll be 2 doors on each side of the addition as well. They're not proposing any additional signage. Landscaping, I have in my report that there's 44 trees located. Some of those trees do extend off-site, so they're not all on their property. But they are going to need to remove about 24 trees for the project, and most of that is related to the elevation change that needs to take place. So on the screen is the plan of tree cutting. I would just ask for a little bit more of a specific plan that gives the diameters of the trees to be removed that are on the priority tree list, and then the diameters of the trees to be planted, so we can make sure that you comply with the tree mitigation, tree replanting or in lieu payment provisions.
So we're requiring a tree survey?
Yep, and they do have a tree survey. It just doesn't include the sizes, and we just need to make sure the existing trees, that the species are labeled with their sizes, and then the ones that are noted as priority trees in the ordinance have to be replaced inch per inch with new trees. It sounds like some of the trees that they're removing, they are actually maybe not the trees, trees and plants being transplanted on site. So there might be some 1-to-1 already. And then any evergreen trees, they have to be at least 6 feet in height, but you can get 2.5-inch credit for each evergreen tree that you put in. And that's in the report. So I just need a little more info to make sure they meet the mitigation standards. Then lighting, they are proposing some additional lighting on the property, which will include 5 additional 5-pole lights on the north and east sides. They're 25 feet in height, not including the base, and 6 wall-mounted lights, and then the existing lights on the site will remain. Based on the photometrics and the parking, they have to comply with certain standards. It does look like you probably exceed the lighting standards, most prevalently the max to min ratio, so you probably have some lights that are putting a lot of light in a concentrated area instead of it spanning out a lesser light over a larger area. So we'll have to look at that, and I'm happy to share the requirements with you. Stormwater management, they did submit plans. They're being reviewed by engineering staff. That was submitted just before the deadline, or not the deadline, the packets went out. As far as operationally, they have 105 full-time employees, and they're open 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. Monday through Thursday, and 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. Friday through Sunday. Deliveries are 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., and garbage pickup is 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Other than that, if there aren't any questions, or even if there are, I'll just go through my recommendations. So when they submit for their formal application, which I think they're trying to submit for September, we would need the updated mitigation landscape plan, Retaining wall specifications certified by an engineer as part of the building permit issuance. Plan Commission should determine if the height and location of the walls is appropriate, and the applicant shall submit renderings including the material type and color of the retaining walls. A parking stall count shall be noted on the plans and will need to comply with the ordinance provisions, and then the 20-foot access entrance width will need to be reviewed and approved by Plan Commission. And I'm asking that they submit that plan that shows the traffic flow and how they're going to clearly mark it on site. We'll need to send it to the fire department for review and approval, just to make sure they have emergency vehicular access and proper hydrant accessibility. Tony from the fire department was at our meeting and did say that the width, that they could get around the building with the width. We would need pictures of the dumpster enclosure, revised photometrics and associated lighting. Stormwater management requirements need to be complied with. An addendum to the stormwater maintenance agreement will end up being required as well. And we will need to know the location and volume of the outdoor pallet storage. Typically, you don't really like to see outdoor storage, so we just need to know where. And I don't see how there's any room on the south side of the property, but we can ask John about that. And then the plans shall clearly identify the location of any HVAC and other mechanical equipment and shall not be visible by adjacent properties.
Or from the street.
Or from the street.
One thing I want to mention on lighting, John, if you could just make sure all your lights are downward facing. Sometimes in light industrial areas, we forget that, request. I'm not sure how many existing lights are already out there. I assume they're compliant, but we want to make sure that all the new ones certainly are.
I'm going to assume the landscape walls are tiered. It's not a 13-foot drop, is it? Or if it is, what kind of fencing do we need for that?
Yeah, I've got a few comments. I could probably answer maybe a few questions that came up during Amy's review, if that's okay, and then certainly open to more questions from the Plan Commission. Regarding the lighting, since Mayor Kent just mentioned that, we're just proposing downward-facing wall packs, which is what's currently on the building. We'll check the photometrics. I didn't notice that the light levels exceeded the city requirements, so that's an easy fix, just adjusting the actual fixtures themselves. Regarding the wayfinding on site, the current facility, which we expanded in 2020, it is all one-way traffic. It's clearly signed there. They are very concerned about safety. You have to really not be paying attention to go the wrong way when you get there, and we'll provide photos for the Plan Commission just to show how that looks. We're moving their access drive to the east. It's recreating the exact same scenario they have right now, just expanding the facility. So as far as the dumpster, we did have a approved dumpster enclosure in 2020. Unfortunately, I can't just pick it up and move it, but we are going to just recreate the same one, provide a picture of what's there right now that was reviewed and approved by this Plan Commission in 2020. We plan to just rebuild it in the same manner and just move it to the back of the building. Regarding the comment about parking, they expect to grow to 105 full-time employees max. As many people understand, manufacturing and most companies in general are struggling for employment, and so they are investing in technology and automation to meet their business needs. So while the current ordinance says they need to have 153 parking stalls, they don't anticipate ever needing more than 120 at the most with visitors. So we've got 116 right now. We would provide a letter from them stating that they don't have the bodies to park 153 cars, nor do they need the parking for that. I had talked to Amy about that a little bit, and that would be part of our final submittals, asking for waiving that ordinance requirement.
That's the thing, John, is that's a hard and fast code. It's not something we have the authority to waive. So it's a problem. It's based on math. It's not based on how many people you think are coming. It's based on the math and what you've told us the use of the square footage is for. So it is a problem. I understand the point you're making, but we just can't make an exception to the code for that.
Okay.
We're gonna have to come up with another plan.
Yeah, no, I'd love to have more conversation. We see in municipalities all over Wisconsin where they're granting exceptions to parking and actually requesting less parking as it's more environmentally friendly. So if Delafield has a different position on that, I'll talk through that with you and try to figure out a solution. So
It's just, like, we don't none of us here have the authority to waive it.
Okay.
Well, I definitely don't, but, you would have to, propose a text amendment, and that's going, that would take several months, and the city would need to look at that very carefully, because it would affect all properties, depending on how you ended up proposing the text, either an M1 or per those specific uses.
Okay.
Communities are changing their a lot of parking codes are getting pretty dated, and, communities are changing them, but it's not a simple 1 month effort. So I just think that's important to understand.
So I'll communicate that back to the building owner that your position is if we don't figure out another 40 unnecessary parking stalls, we can't move forward with this project right now? That's
Pretty
the position
much.
you're saying?
Isn't it how you accommodate them? I mean, couldn't you have an agreement with an adjacent property owner?
Well, you could.
Or you could have green space that's banked. I mean, there's
But
ways around it.
They don't have any.
Hey, we
green
want to
space.
help them find a solution.
I know,
We're
I
running
know.
through all these concepts, and they have nowhere. It doesn't appear they have anywhere to bank any.
Understood.
And so
No,
this off-site thing is a possibility, but they got to find one.
Yeah, banking with the proposed expansion would not be an option on this site. There are adjacent property owners that have really little to no parking being used at all right now, so that would have to be something I'll talk to Nick and Dave about approaching to get an agreement in place.
And that's happened downtown here before too. I mean, it goes way back, but I mean.
Okay. I didn't realize
If you want
Delafield had
somebody
that
else.
position, that they were that stringent on the ordinance where they would,
What, following it?
will not allow, no. That was a softball, I'm sorry, Tim. No, just not allowing an owner to say, hey, this is our business as far as our employee count. We don't have the employees to park, so.
Nothing's ever
Redesignate.
perfect, and when Olive Garden came in, they said, "Oh my gosh, your code isn't enough. We need more spots than your code's even asking for." So,
Sure.
it goes. We've seen it go both ways.
Need Olive Garden patrons to work in manufacturing.
That's right.
Right, I mean, it
solve a lot of
depends on the
problems,
use.
so.
Churches and restaurants are usually underparked per the code, and these types of facilities can be overparked based on changing characteristics like you suggested. The only other thing that I could think of, and I don't think it's gonna help you that much, because it's significant loss or non-compliance with parking, is office. You have 10,850 square feet of office, and that requires the most parking. And, the manufacturing, you could somehow decrease those spaces and increase your warehousing spaces, and it would reduce the requirements, but I don't know that it's enough.
Can't they redesignate some of the office space for like conference rooms?
They can designate the office spaces as manufacturing and warehousing would be different. I don't know how we would look at the conference rooms. I'd have to look at the code.
Yeah, they have a couple large, like there's a boardroom and then there's a employee break room that probably is counted as office square footage. So, okay. Well, as long as I understand the position, we'll try to figure out a creative solution. I know when we came to the Plan Commission in 2020, Scott Tanis owned the business and he's sold it. Nick Mallinger now owns it, and he's been looking for the last 3 years for ways to expand his business, either by moving to another municipality or staying here in Delafield. And so this expansion does meet a lot of their business growth and need to invest in equipment to keep up with it because they can't get the employees. So the parking, that'll be a big deal. So, all right. As far as the landscaping goes, we did have a tree survey completed this week, so you'll an updated survey, Amy, so you'll see that information coming soon. And then as far as the HVAC equipment, the building is heated only with just air exchange, so there isn't any rooftop units or anything like that. So we understand the screening requirements if they were to add that. Regarding the pallet storage, they have they make brushes for industries like conveyor belts and walkways you see at the airports. And so a lot of their product is very long. So they get these long shipping pallets. They actually have a spot in the back by the retaining wall that they currently have that they stack it up. I recommended to them that they actually put that on the application because I know a lot of businesses just do it without asking for permission. So that's why we did put it on there so everybody was aware that they're doing that. They intend to keep doing that. We do have a spot that they put it in that we can show on the plan clearly, and we can even provide some pictures. So again, if that's problematic or there's rules around that, I would rather everybody know so we can try and come up with a solution for them.
Are they picked up periodically?
They're constantly swapping them in and
So
out.
there's
It's kind of a staging area. I mean, they're coming off raw material, putting finish on, so they've got a spot in the back. They just stack and pick, you know.
As long as you can't see them from the road, we're probably going to be fine.
You can't. I mean, they're in the back, smack dab in the middle of the back of the building, so you never see them. Yeah. The retaining wall question. The current retaining wall that's there is a stacked system that there are interlock systems that actually go vertical without going backwards. That's what's there, and so we were going to extend that system around the corner. Because at that height, if it is a system that steps back, then we need more space, and we're going to lose more space. So
We have examples of that over by Heritage Drive going into Target. You look behind those buildings, I think those are approaching 20 feet.
yeah,
Do you fall at enough of an angle that you tumble?
Have faith in engineering.
I do.
Okay.
All right, then
We do have some around the city.
Okay.
yeah,
15 feet tall or taller.
it helps not to lose square footage. We still have to be off the property line. I think 3 to 5, 6 feet. There's an ordinance that we got the regulations on, and
You mean the city's ordinance?
yeah, because you
The
can't.
commission has to approve any wall that doesn't comply with the setbacks.
Okay.
That would be the provision.
I think the way we have it drawn right now, it does comply with the setbacks, but there was probably a need for a fence at the top, right, because of the height. I think that was another thing that we need
Scott,
to.
do they need to
we
have,
need to
or I
show.
guess Plan Commission can make that determination too?
What is that?
A height or a fence above the wall,
Railing
13-foot tall
or-
wall?
Yeah, it's a site plan element, and safety's part of it.
Yeah. It's definitely high enough that it needs one. In fact, I think we brought that up at the staff meeting about needing to look into fence, railing, whatever it is. Something's going to be needed up there.
So I would just put that with your rendering of the materials of the wall.
We can add that. Yeah, I think we anticipated we'd need to add it. The property to the south is heavily wooded. I don't even know what's back there, but I think at some point we'd have to at least add the fence to cover the new retaining wall.
Yeah, that 5-foot offset, because I have it wrong in my report. You just approved an ordinance, or the council just approved an ordinance, instead of retaining walls having to meet the regular setback or coming to Plan Commission, they have to meet a 5-foot setback or come to Plan Commission. In this case, he's coming to Plan Commission anyway, but just keep that in mind. It's a 5-foot requirement.
So our intention was to come tonight to at least get some feedback. Certainly finding out about the parking is helpful, so we can try to accommodate that. We did make a submittal last week in order to get on the September commission, because I know that the date is today, unfortunately, with the way the dates fall, and we didn't want to lose 2 months. But Tanis Brush is committed to doing this project. If we get approval, we would like to do some of the site work over the winter. It's a good time of the year for us. We have about 14,000 cubic yards of fill we have to export from the site. And then the retaining wall as well, building it during the winter is actually helpful for us. And then that would prep us to be able to start the actual expansion in spring, which I know there's permitting and approvals, but that was our hope. They do have the financing, they own the land, they're ready to go ahead with this expansion, and that was our hope to get on the September with our final submittal for potential vote and approval, and then keep moving through the approval process with the city and the state. So.
As always, we'll get you through this process as quickly as we can once you get us the information we ask for.
Sure.
So John, the
Quite a bit that's been presented already. So.
The problem, they're not going to be able to prove it without meeting the parking requirements. So, I mean, I don't know how quickly you can try to resolve that, but we understand the deadline is the same day as the meeting. I mean, if I could have revised plan material next week that include corrected parking, we could put you on the September agenda, but otherwise, it will probably have to be October.
Okay. I'm meeting with Tanis Brush tomorrow morning, so we'll react to this quickly. They're highly motivated to make sure you get the information you're asking for, and we've put a lot of time into the plans already, so it's not without a lot of work just to get to this meeting. Are there any other comments on the project?
Another item Amy mentioned that I don't know if you touched on was stormwater management.
They did submit full stormwater plans. They just haven't been reviewed yet.
For the build out? Okay.
Yeah, we knew that was probably going to take a little bit of time, and we had prepped for this in 2020, and at the time we had received at least some preliminary feedback from Mike and SEH, and so Pinnacle Engineering has already been working on this for almost a couple months, and yeah, we were trying to get ahead of that as well. The pond will be one of the first things we have to expand, with the sequencing.
Yeah, I'm confident it can be done. So,
I don't know if this makes financial sense, but can you put a tank underground and turn some of that pond into parking?
I mean, anything can be done.
Pickleball, indoor pickleball court will be cheaper than that.
Yeah, easily.
Just trying to think of something.
I think we'll explore options. There's the other, just putting parking on to put it on when they don't even need it. That's the other part that we want to be mindful of with the building owner. So let's look at how we've got the building classified, re-examine exactly how all those existing uses are being used, make sure we've got it as accurate as possible for the calculation, and then we'll probably talk to the neighbors across the street and see if we can get a shared parking agreement or something.
Sounds good. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thanks for coming.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Okay, now we are ready to move on to 11. A discussion and possible action to amend sections of Article 1 of the City of Delafield zoning ordinance, including Section 52-16D, yard projections, and Section 52-21 street access requirements, and by amending the text of Article 3 of the City of Delafield zoning ordinance, including Section 5289A through D, plans of operation, and possibly other sections related to the topics specified in this notice. Amy.
Okay, so the items in this first agenda item were discussed at last month's meeting. I just went through the proposed language with the city's attorney. He did clean up the wording a little bit, but the yard projection section, which I have on the screen, but you probably can't read it. The yard projection
Blow
language
it way up.
is very similar to what we discussed. I mean, there were no changes to the content. The wording is, cleaner, but the content is the same. So the projections can't go any closer to 5 feet from the lot line. And then depending on the feature, it's limited in how wide it can be in the first place, but no closer than 5 feet to a lot line. Any questions on the yard projections? Anyone? Okay, and then the street access requirements, we talked about it last month's meeting, but I believe I mentioned that I would have the attorney draft language because it was kind of a confusing paragraph. And so the new language does talk about how, and it's similar to the way it was previously written, that no principal building can be erected on a lot without a public street unless they receive plan commission approval and unless there's an easement width of at least 30 feet or 60 feet for more than 2 lots. There's an added provision for lots that were created prior to January 1st, 2023. If the Plan Commission determines that it's impractical to comply with the permanent easement widths, they can decide what is appropriate. So I believe at last month's meeting, we showed a couple of examples. Where are they? Along Milwaukee Street, Scott? Where it would, you could never get a 30-foot wide easement. They're existing lots. They've been getting built on, and this would give an opportunity to continue allowing people to utilize existing lots. But any lots going forward, you know, we're not, the city isn't going to approve a lot not abutting a public road unless they meet the provisions that would match this code requirement, and it's really not condoned in the first place unless it's extraordinarily exceptional. Does that make sense to everybody? And then
Well, as I read this, just a ground check it, this wording, you know, prior to 2023, it doesn't make it any easier for people to create unusual lots as a general statement. Am I reading?
no, this section does not actually have to do with the creation of lots. It has to do with the construction of buildings on existing lots. And the reason we say lots prior to January 1st is we're assuming a lot of those lots might be legal nonconforming and were never reviewed by the city in the first place. And so meeting a minimum access provision may not be practical.
So I'm sorry if I'm going backwards, but there's an existing lot and it's oddly configured because otherwise we wouldn't even be talking about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to create an easement so that they can create a lot. They might have a larger parcel and they're trying to get the lots.
No, this provision is not for that. So
Okay.
there's separate provisions. I believe it's in the land division ordinance. This is just for, and not all municipalities require this, but it's probably not a bad thing. This is for a lot that already exists, that may not abut a public road, and somebody wants to build a house, for example. Before they can do that, it needs to come to Plan Commission to make sure they have appropriate access. You can make sure emergency vehicles can get to their site, and that it meets this width requirement, and then there's that exception in time where sometimes the lots won't be able to meet the width, but at least there's general criteria provided.
Are you talking about a lot where they're landlocked?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's existing lots out there that were created prior to the ordinance being in effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just quick show you an example because I think Scott's had, deals with these lots. Here's an example, like right on Milwaukee Street. See all these 3 lots?
You're not up on this.
Hey, Mike, can we get
Oh, there
her
we
up
go.
on the screen? There we go.
So I'll zoom in a little bit more.
And more, please.
So right,
There you go.
you have like 3 lots right on the lake. Those do not abut a public road.
Wow.
So if they wanted to rebuild on those lots, we would want to make sure there's appropriate easements in place.
Yeah, and so if someone's got a 2-acre lot, like on, whatever, let's just, Genesee Street or something, and they want to try to split it up and put a lot behind, our new lot provisions
Right.
take care of all that as far as road frontage and all that other stuff, right?
Yeah, and then when that happens, if you were to approve it, you would make sure they have the proper easements and the proper widths anyway.
That kind of becomes a flag lot, isn't it?
That's what I
Yeah.
don't want.
Yeah,
So we've had these examples come
That's
up.
what I don't want.
So I don't see
Not
that.
condoned, we don't, you don't
There
condone
by,
it. But if you
someone
were to
trying to show
approve
it
it,
later.
Yeah, so if someone comes up with a CSM and says, I'm just going to create a little lot, I just want a cabin back there.
And this
And then they
ordinance
come
says
back
I can put
2
an
years later
easement
and said,
through
"I
to
wanna
get
put an
to it.
easement."
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the land division part.
The land division is something where we need to, yeah.
Yep.
This does not apply to land division. It
I
applies
know.
to existing
But
lots.
I'm just saying if
And
somebody-
Before I can issue a building permit, I have to make sure they have adequate access.
right.
So, yeah, you can't, you can't
He's
just
just
create
asking
a
though,
lot.
do we have that in effect? It's a different section of the code.
Yeah. As you can tell, this is an important topic for us, so we want to make sure we're understanding, we're not creating some new opening. At least that's what I'm thinking.
No. And then following that, there's an erection or attachment of garage accessory structure. So like, for example, these lots on Wisconsin Avenue, if they wanted to put an accessory structure, they don't have to come to you. It's accessory to something that already exists. And that's how it used to read, although there was a provision in there that they were deemed non-conforming uses, which doesn't make sense. You wouldn't issue a permit for a new structure and call it a non-conforming use. So that got deleted, the attorney agreed, but otherwise it's very similar to the way it previously read, it just makes more sense. All right. Then, plan of operations, again, this section is just stating the provision about changes to owner, business, and operator names only require administrative approval. At your request, we did add, an amendment approved under this provision shall be reported to the Plan Commission at a meeting following the approval. I don't plan on bringing back sports and classics because I already brought it up tonight. And then it's really just cleaning up language. We took out plan of operation. We talked about this last month. Plan of operation exemptions included all municipal offices and public schools. We changed that to only City of Delafield facilities are exempt. And then I just added a couple of things that I like to see in plan of operations that were not noted. Interior floor plan of the tenant space and a narrative explaining the operation. Any questions? If not, I would recommend Common Council, that your motion state that you recommend Common Council adopt the enclosed draft ordinance to amend several sections of Article 1 and Article 3 of the City of Delafield zoning ordinance subject to city attorney review. The city attorney has already reviewed the draft ordinance, but I always like to keep that in case he decides something needs to be tweaked. She.
I'll motion to recommend Common Council adopt the enclosed draft ordinance to amend several sections of Article 1 and 3 of the City of Delafield zoning ordinance, subject to city attorney review.
I'll second.
All right, is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. All right, Rondo 11B, discussion and possible action to schedule a public hearing to amend sections Article 4 zoning districts and Article 10 administration and penalties of the City of Delafield zoning ordinance. Amy.
All right, I'll go through this generally. I think what I'll do next month is make copies because it's too hard to see on the screen, and I think you probably want to look at the language. So this is the whole, Article 10 is the whole administration section. Not that there is, significant changes, but we had the city attorney and Scott just go through it to see if things needed to be updated. There's been some statutory changes related to variances, and so he went through and incorporated those. A couple of things that we do need to discuss. Authority, this is already, this added C that says that the board shall have the powers to hear and decide appeals where it's alleged there's an error. That's already in this section. He's just adding it to this first provision for additional affirmation. However, I do want to look into, there is a reference in here that the board reviews special exceptions. I don't know if you remember, but
I do.
A year or so ago, we changed that non-conforming structure section, and there's a whole big paragraph about special exceptions, and they come to Plan Commission, and a public hearing is required. It applies to the non-conforming structures and then also lots that are non-conforming to lake frontage. And so, and then the definition of special exception was created, and it has similar language. But as I was looking through this code and I typed in special exception, or I don't know what I typed in exception, I found that there's a definition that's exception, comma, special. and it talks about going to the Board of Appeals, and it's a different measure.
Yeah.
So we need to clean that up for next month and propose that for a public hearing as part of these amendments.
Well, that's further down, right?
Well, I'm just saying it because in this number C, it refers to the fact that they review special exceptions too. So I think we want to keep those provisions with non-conforming structures and lake frontage going to Plan Commission, because the idea was that if they met certain provisions, it was reasonable. They didn't have to prove a hardship. And so I'll continue to talk to Michael, but, you know, the previous attorney thought that special exception was an appropriate term. We'll just make sure that's still an appropriate term, and if it's not, we may have to change it to simply an except. I think we intentionally didn't use exception because that's used throughout the code in different contexts. But you could also use waiver, or there's other terms that could be used, but we need to work through that. Then some of this stuff he removed because it's just implied, such as all meetings have to be open to the public. That's implied per the statutes. You don't have a choice anyway.
But before you move on, just back to 1C on that first page there. I just seem to have this feeling that there's more definition in the state statute to hardship than what we have listed here. Now, we discussed about this a little before the meeting, that we think it's copied there, but I'm just not sure it's all there. And at least I'd like to ask Michael if we would be better off to reference the state statute as opposed to trying to write it, just repeat it here in our own code. In the past, the logic has been you write the statute because if the state changes something, you're referring to the statute and it changes with it. Otherwise, your code can get out of date.
Yeah, I mean, I think the justification for a variance is probably, it's important enough to spell it out. But we can make sure that it complies with the statute. This section includes several factors. It includes the appeals and error, it includes the special exceptions, and it includes the variances. So there's kind of a lot blended in here. But then it's also repeated later on. I think you also brought it up later on. So yes, we can look at that.
Did you want to say anything about the administrative official note that you have there?
So he's just suggesting we might want to define it, so we can look at that for next month's meeting, whether or not that gets defined. I mean, he does state that it does not include any committee, commission, board, council, or their individual members. So I'm not exactly sure how, what he would use as a definition. But essentially, it's staff. It's me, Scott, Tom, Molly. If we make a decision that they think is wrong, they have the right to go to the Board of Appeals to argue against that. Then there's a section on cooperation with Plan Commission, which the attorney proposes that we strike. Typically, the board doesn't, the board and Plan Commission have two different roles, and one does not have to respond to the other. So he thinks that should be removed. I would
So
agree
when you're
that
saying
the-
removed, are you talking about 2A? Or am I ahead of you?
Yep, 2A, 2-1. Well, what is that? B1.
Okay,
First item on page 2, if you have.
got it.
Yeah, it doesn't sound right that that would even be in there to begin with.
Yeah, I've never seen that in there, so get rid of that. Let's see, again, this other stuff, it's implied.
What about 2A, all meetings of such board shall be open to the public? I mean, is he removing that, do you think, because that's a given?
Yes,
Okay,
Yeah, we
it's just
talked about that.
redundant?
yes, because it's implied, it's statutory, and if you put it here, then you almost have to make sure you're putting it everywhere, wherever there's a meeting.
Okay.
So I haven't really seen that in the code either. There's an 2C. It says something about how if an applicant proposes a change to an application after they apply, then there can be like a reversal, or it has to be re-advertised or reheard. He's removing that because they have to their application has to be submitted incomplete, and that gets noticed in the paper, and they can't make changes to
Yeah.
it once they've made that application. So that's also kind of in D. An application of the board shall include the same data and information presented to the original authority whose decision is being appealed. So they can't make changes unless they reapply.
It was poorly written in there before, that's for sure.
Yeah, and then there's the certiorari review. Any person aggrieved by a decision has 30 days to appeal. That comes from the statutes, and it looks like it wasn't in here previously. And then appeal of administrative decisions. So this goes back to appealing a department's decision. They have to make that within 20 days. So if Scott appeals or denies something and they want to appeal that decision for whatever reason, they have to do that within 20 days. The one above is the board makes a decision and folks can appeal its decision and they have 30 days. So there's different timelines.
Do they make that appeal to the circuit court?
The, the certiorari one, yes. The appeal rights to appeal our decisions as staff goes to the board.
I'm trying to think, Tim, of an instance where that's ever happened. Can you think of one in your tenure?
No, we're on a streak.
So
Knock on wood.
I had one in a previous role where we called turkeys or something poultry, because there were poultry definitions, and an applicant appealed to the Board of Appeals that they did not meet the definition of poultry.
Huh.
So that's an example if you need one.
How did it turn out?
You don't have those.
They did not win the case. But I mean, it went into the Webster Dictionary and kind of went on and on. Okay, hearing, he is saying that, and there's a couple of instances in here where it talks about like the plan commission, or the board has to hear something within a certain time frame, 40 days, that he's removing the days and saying reasonable time. He's just giving the publication requirements. What else do we really need to talk about? The decision has to be made within a certain time frame, or he's taking that out again, reasonable time.
Well, that's good. I mean, you end up with no quorum and then a default judgment.
Successive applications, it's in here already, I believe, somewhere, but he's just cleaning it up and saying that once an appeal has been denied, they can't rehear it.
Yeah.
Or the board can't rehear it. He's got specifications for area variances. This is coming from the statutes. I do want to ask him, the statutes include area variance requirements and use variance requirements, and he's not including the use variances. It may be because he's saying the city won't hear them. Essentially, what the experts will say is a use variance lends itself to a rezone, and if it's not appropriate to rezone it to a certain district to allow the use, it shouldn't be allowed at all. I just want to make sure statutorily that we can exclude use variances. And then the review criteria, this is, I think, where you came back, you were saying that might not be enough language. We'll double check with the statutes. That's it on the variances.
What about the note at the bottom? You already went over that?
I
or-
went over it. That's the special, I just put in the two definitions for special exception and then exception special. So we'll-
And I don't remember seeing that exception special before. Should we just delete that section? I mean, we didn't discuss that last time. Does
No.
that bring value or?
I don't think I knew it existed last time. Well, I know I didn't know it existed last time. But it's important it has value because that one calls for special exceptions to go to the Board of Appeals. And I think it's actually, you have a whole nother chapter, Code of Ordinances, where it refers to different committees and what they do. And it talks about special exception going to Board of Appeals too. So if we're gonna keep it the way we rewrote it a year ago, we need to tweak the other chapter and then, yes, we would just completely remove exception, comma, special. Administration of building permits and occupancy permits. There, he's got removing a line item. It says see Article 2 of Chapter Site Plan Requirements. It just doesn't really have any meaning. If something needs site plan approval, it needs it. It's in that section. Scott had a question. It's not in your packets about B2 procedure. It talks about certificate of occupancy for items that don't need a building permit. There is no such thing. So Scott's suggesting that an applicant shall request occupancy. We'll need to talk about this more too, because I don't know if this is referring to items that normally require site plan approval, Scott, or business plan of operation approval. But we do issue a certification of compliance, so maybe we change the wording.
So Olive Garden builds a brand-new building, they gain their initial occupancy, I do a final inspection and issue an occupancy certificate. But when they sell to another restaurant, I normally would not issue a certificate of occupancy to another, occupant. Their business plan would come through here, you and this board would approve it, but normally it's not a certificate from me.
Yeah.
So the initial occupancy, yes, me. Subsequent occupancies, just by this board's approval.
Right. So we probably want to change it to certificate of compliance and take you out of it completely. So we'll work up that language. And then Scott would like to add some items to B. So no occupancy shall be issued until there's a final building inspection, approved erosion control measures are in place, water meter installed, safe water test received, and impact and connection fees paid in full. So those are items that aren't already addressed. That's when they do need a permit, building permit. And then under 3, it says water supply. Scott would like to eliminate evidence being submitted that water quality information, including the location of the proposed well and the distance from the proposed well to any septic system, building, or other well located or proposed to be located within 100 feet. What we might want to do there is state that we might want to add something in there about requiring a preliminary site evaluation from Waukesha County when necessary, which is a requirement in order to have an addition or modification to a structure. But we wouldn't want the city to be responsible for septic requirements.
Correct.
And then Scott's also proposing in C2 to increase the bond to $5,000.
So I have not granted a temporary occupancy permit. So I really haven't utilized this, but these numbers are way too low. It's ripe for abuse. So if somebody wants to go through this formal process, the number should be higher.
Anyone object?
You're basically saying that's a typical number that you've experienced in other communities?
I want them to comply, and if you don't hold enough money, there's no incentive to comply. To come back and get your final occupancy. $250, see ya. Now I have to go chase them.
Yeah, makes sense.
And it rarely comes into play. It's never come into play. But if we're gonna have it, and if it's gonna be used every now and then, let's make it work.
All right.
City's advantage.
And then just clean up changes and amendments. Chapter 52, 294. Again, there's a reference about timeframes So the common council shall be, the recommendation shall be made in writing to the common council and shall be made within 45 days. He's proposing we remove that. And that the plan commission shall review all proposed changes and amendments and shall conduct necessary investigations. Because that's already below. Based on its review and findings, the plan. I don't know why that's being removed, actually. I'm gonna ask about that one. D, why he's removing that last sentence. Common council's action, that's just cleanup. Protest, letter H. So I guess we're looking for a little history here because this is an unusual provision. It says that in the event of a protest against such district change or amendment, so this would be an amendment to the ordinance or map, zoning district, I would assume is most common. Signed and acknowledged, so if there's a protest signed and acknowledged by the owners of 20% or more, either of the areas of the land included in such change. By owners of 20, oh yeah, owners of 20% or more of the land immediately adjacent, extending 100 feet from the owners, by the owners of 20% or more of the land directly opposite thereto, extending 100 feet from the street frontage. Such changes or amendments shall not become effective except for a 3/4 vote of the full council. So Michael had suggested maybe 50% or removing it completely. One thing that we did talk about is it's kind of a confusing paragraph in that what if it's a bigger property that's proposing an amendment and there's only one adjacent property owner within 100 feet, that one person can control or require a supermajority vote, which is pretty, could be pretty restrictive on the applicants, and because typically committees decide on a simple majority.
It's got to be 20% of the landowners adjacent.
Yes, but if there's only one landowner, then they have 100% control. And a lot of these,
Getting it to a, yeah, you're right.
a lot of properties are going to have minimal, with the rezone, I mean, downtown is different, but like you get into the rural areas, a lot of those are 3 and 2 acre lots.
So this came into play, and it was, I believe, the state law changed where this is no. This used to be right out of state law, I thought, and that changed, and so there was talk about getting rid of it, and we left it in. But what you just stated was not even considered as a possibility.
Yeah, that was first I heard of that too.
But there's still protection under state law that's just not, it doesn't, it's all of this, I believe, but it doesn't require the supermajority, if I recall. I could be wrong, but I believe that anyone can bring up a protest. And the only thing that differs with ours, I believe, at least at the time, was that we needed a supermajority of the council to override it. Or to sustain, to deny the objection. And so state law, I believe, allows it to be without that. So I think this might be redundant, just with the.
Yeah, we couldn't find anything, but we can look into it. No, we can look into it further because when I was talking to Michael, he said, that's the purpose of a public hearing is you're hearing from those objecting entities and then making your decision, and the majority majority prevails.
I got all the information. I was just looking at the form today.
Yeah, if you find, I guess with that, we'll continue to research it. If you find anything, let me know. I have not seen this provision.
Well, I know it's been used, and I know it's been used effectively. And regardless of the outcome, I mean, I didn't object to the process at the time. It was the rule, and we followed the rules.
Yeah, I think the point is just 20% can, in probably a lot of cases in the city with the bigger lots, be a single property owner could control that.
And maybe we can come up with some wording to have a workaround for a strange scenario like that. based on the other things that you find, potentially keeping it in there.
The only problem I have with that is if there's a protest by a landowner and his property is much bigger than the land he's protesting, I feel that he should carry more weight then. He has more investment.
There's a whole lot of not in my backyard
Yeah,
mentality.
I know.
And that's,
Hey, I've been there.
Yeah. You're speaking to somebody that knows that very well.
you know, there should be reason behind that, and that's what the hearing and process is for in committee review.
Well, in the protest.
But this is a
form,
significant-
You list your reasons. It's not like, I just am against it. You have to list your reasons.
And it's on a significant change. We're not talking about an auxiliary structure or something. We're talking about the entire use of a property.
Yes.
That's a big deal.
I'm sure we'll talk about this more.
Okay. I mean, whatever you decide to do, it's just an unusual provision. They do have to file it with the city clerk at least 24 hours prior to the date of the meeting, of the council. Okay,
How much was the time? I'm sorry.
24 hours.
It would be nice if we had a little more time than that. That's for sure.
She has to timestamp it and sign it and everything. There's a whole process to that.
If we have the ability to make that a little longer, that would be nice. Just for staff to just process it and notify people and, send out a revised packet to let people know.
Okay. Public hearing notification, we already talked about this, changing the 100-foot notification for Board of Appeals to 300 feet to match the rest of the hearing requirements. And then the fun stuff. Scott does mention, so penalties. Michael changed you can't forfeit not less than $10 a day and no more than $200 a day. He changed that to $500 a day to match the other municipal code for penalties. But Scott had a good recommendation of should we just refer to the penalty code, which is a whole different chapter, so that they're always consistent. So we can talk to Michael about just referring to that chapter. That might be easier. Permitted uses in all districts. So last time we talked about removing railroads altogether, but that churches should be relocated and where should they go? And so there was some discussion about only allowing them in public and institutional and whether or not they should be conditional uses. We looked at all of the churches in the city, and all of them but Neshota House, there's a church component to Neshota House, all of the rest of them are public and institutional, and they are conditional uses. The Neshota House is RLE or RL2 with a conditional use. So I think P1 does seem to make a lot of sense. As far as being a conditional use or a permitted use, I did ask Michael to look at that district carefully because it actually conflicts with itself in that there's a list of permitted uses that are public in nature and institutional, and those same uses are listed under the conditional use section. And so one thing is you really shouldn't have a zoning district that doesn't have any real permitted by right uses, and it almost implies that that's the case here. But it seems like the direction we'll go in is having a church and public institutional and require conditional use. Does anybody object to that? And then we'll have to figure out the rest of that district. And then as part of churches, you can decide whether or not you want specific provisions in the conditional use section of the code. Some that I see frequently are potentially like double the offset or allowing an increase in height because it's a church-type facility, or making sure that special events and other activities are being regulated. I do think that can be regulated through a site plan regardless.
Maybe that's why the fix was to make all the things that are allowed conditional uses, so you could work those exceptions, those unique situations through.
You just have to be careful because just like CBRFs, you know, the more you put in the code, the more concrete and easier it is to win your case going forward.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it last time, we did have, I mean, there was a church right downtown for a while.
Right.
They ended up moving out to Highway C, but it was an Anglican church that was fine. I mean, in the CBD too, I think. But
So the big thing there is, I mean, you could be bringing a lot of tax exempt properties into.
I didn't say it was a good idea. I'm just saying it was fine.
So, permitted accessory uses in the residential districts. This is that new section. I mean, there's a lot of changes in this section. So for one, we just have attached garages listed, so you can have an attached garage. There's nothing really to that. Two, you can have a maximum of 2 accessory buildings, subject to the following provisions. The aggregate square feet, so at the last meeting, you said to base it off of square footage of lot and to kind of mimic the counties. So I have in here, aggregate square footage shall not exceed 600 square feet on lots less than 14,000 square feet. Aggregate square footage shall not exceed 750 square feet or 2%, whichever is greater on lots 14,000 square feet or larger. On the right, I have comments that would give you the square footages allowed if that percentage was bumped up to 3%, based on a 1 acre lot, a 2 acre lot, and a 3 acre lot. With 2%, just so you know, a 1 acre lot would be allowed an 871 square foot structure. 2 acre lot would be allowed a 1,742 square foot structure, and a 3 acre lot would be allowed a 2,613 square foot structure. A couple of those outbuildings that have been in here recently are bigger than those, so just keep that in mind. There's no exception here for variances or special exceptions. No accessory building.
Like 3 acre lot, 3,900 square feet, I mean, that's way bigger than somebody's house typically.
Yeah, so that would be 3%. No accessory building shall contain the amenities of a living unit. No human habitation or sleeping quarters is permitted. Plumbing is limited to a single sink and toilet. No shower or kitchenette facilities are permitted. A separate sewer connection is required. If any plumbing is proposed in an accessory building, a declaration of restriction shall be drafted by city staff and recorded with Waukesha County Register of Deeds that prohibits commercial operations in any human habitation unless otherwise approved by this ordinance. Then we're removing the utility structures no larger than 240 square feet because that's being replaced with the above language. We removed lodging or boarding for not more than 2 lodgers. Removed model homes, that also needs to be removed from the conditional use section. It was determined that that's reviewed and dealt with at the time a subdivision comes in as part of their developer's agreement and declaration of restrictions. Home occupations, we kept the same, I just deleted language that came out of, that mimicked the definition section, and I refer to the definition section. No changes to signs, boathouses, or private piers. I'm removing all of the provisions for structures that exceed 1,200 square feet because it's no longer in play. But,
Before you move on 5,
yep,
I'm sorry. Forget that. I see. I was just going to talk about signs, but you have that that's in 6. Home occupations wouldn't be allowed to have signs, right?
there might be something there's a separate home occupation. I think there's something like 2 square.
It's a very small sign, and it has to be in a certain location, often by the front door, so not out at the street.
So we're removing all that extra square footage stuff, but there was a provision in there that no stable, barn, or shed falling within the requirement, and on a lot of less than 3 acres in size shall be used for housing of livestock other than chickens. So I just have a provision that the housing of livestock is prohibited on lots less than 3 acres in size other than chickens as described herein. And then there's the chicken provisions. No change.
And just so you all know, Scott recently counted some chickens.
Like Rocky and the Rooster.
Oh, no.
Good for for you.
I've been asking that ever since the code went in, who's in charge of counting the chickens? And I always get the, not me, not me, not me. Well, apparently now it's Scott.
How many chickens we got?
So my recommended motion is to discuss and possibly act on scheduling a public hearing. I don't think we're ready for a public hearing yet, because we need to, Scott, Michael, and I need to work through some of this stuff. But are there any comments, concerns, or context changes that you'd like to see? Okay, we'll try to get it as good as we can so that perhaps you can schedule a hearing for October. Do you want to go with 2% on the accessory structures versus 3%?
That's plenty.
2%.
Is it total of, like you can have 2 structures?
Yes, aggregate total.
So for 3 acres, I computed like 2,600 square feet, or 25, I think. That would
Well, it
be
says here 3 acres, 2% to
1,742.
on 2 acres.
So you could have
Oh, I'm
1,000,
talking about 3, I was just going off of 3 acres, which
Oh.
is my key. So.
2,600.
Oh, really? It's all about you, Dan?
Just happens to be my scenario, I use it as an example.
Do you have non-conforming structures now?
I'd
answer that.
2 structures.
2,613 square feet. So you could have a 1,600 square foot structure and a 1,000 square foot
That's
structure.
total, okay.
Or one huge, one big structure.
So we come with our measuring tape.
No, they're not, they conform to that.
So-
In the future,
I will say, this is far more straightforward and simple. It is
Yes.
what it is. And I think Scott and I both have had experiences. When you have a rule like this, people just have to follow it and they make it work, they make it work and that's their option.
Yeah.
It'd be almost impossible to get a variance because it's an accessory structure to begin with and it's not necessary to practically utilize a property for its permitted purpose. So,
And my concern is people basically building a second residency on there, and we've added restrictions in here that to 1 sink and 1 toilet, which,
As soon as you add the drainage, I mean, we're talking the same thing about boathouses.
Yeah.
As soon as you put that stuff in, it's like, unless you get back in there, they're still working after they've gotten their permit.
now do they remodel it when it sells through 2 different people and they don't pull a building permit to do the remodel? I mean, until we get a
Shower, who
complaint, we
cares,
don't know.
right?
In my situation of a pool house, a toilet and sink was approved.
so it says you can have a toilet and a sink, but then you are gonna record that deed restriction. So maybe you'll try to get away with violating it, but any future owner is aware of the way the rules are supposed to be and
So Amy, we should exclude boathouses from these accessory structure rules?
you mean the plumbing part?
Yes.
Yeah, let me think about that. Yeah, we can say something like C section whatever for boathouse provisions. That helps clarify it. I mean, no matter what, the more restrictive provisions apply, so it should uphold, but we should, I think that's a good idea.
To be honest, we talked about this at the last lake welfare meeting where we want to remove even putting in a sink into a boathouse. If they want plumbing, they can use an outdoor hose bib and that's it. No drainage. Because it's a slippery slope. Put in a sink, then you put in a toilet, then you have a shower. you have a
Shower.
residence.
So in unincorporated
That's bad.
areas, that's a new statutory provision that no plumbing is allowed.
I like to think people would be responsible, and many are, but it's the ones that aren't that ruin it for everybody.
Pareto's law, it's not even 80-20, it's 5%, but you get those people, although maybe it's more with these lake house people. I don't know. I've lost my I've lost my rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Otherwise, we'll probably just move on.
Okay.
Next agenda item?
Yep. I buried it, so I got to get back to it.
Computer turned off.
Okay. 11C, discussion of possible action to repeal and recreate the text and official maps of Chapter 16, Article 2 of the City of Delafield floodplain zoning ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, Wisconsin DNR. Sometimes we call them Wisconsin Department of Nat, sometimes we call them just Department of Natural Resources. Moves back and forth.
Okay, so, the city of Delafield has a floodplain ordinance right now. You're required to adopt a floodplain ordinance that meets the state and federal standards in order to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. If you don't participate in the National Flood Insurance Program as a community, then your residents can't apply for flood insurance. So it is important. Anytime FEMA and the DNR so choose to update the maps, then you have to go in and update your ordinances to comply with their model ordinance or meet the provisions of their model ordinance. Hold on, I just lost my computer here. The Delafield's existing ordinance complies with the previous version of the model ordinance. So all we really tried to do here is update the ordinance to comply. The reason why they are asking the city to do it is because the maps were amended, several of the watersheds were restudied in Waukesha County. So that automatically changes the flood insurance study, which is part of the maps, and the map panels. There are 2 panels in the city of Delafield that were impacted with the draft maps, but neither of the areas in the draft maps are in the city of Delafield. So the panels cover multiple municipalities because it's watershed based. It has nothing to do with municipalities. And I believe one of them's got Village of Heartland and the other one might have, I don't think it's Village of Heartland, it might be Oconomowoc. And I did have that map up and available. But anyway, there are no mapping changes in Delafield. So it's really just the insurance study and then renumbering 2 of the panels that happen to include city lands, but there are no changes. In the draft ordinance that I put online, there's a highlighted section from the DNR staff regarding other studies, because they weren't sure if the city had other studies or dam failure analyses that would apply. They came back and there aren't any, so I'll just be deleting that section to go to council.
Did any of the maps of Lake Nagawicca and Upper Neshota stayed the same?
Yes.
And that they stayed the same as they exist, as they were last? Okay.
2014, and that's part of your ordinance now. They were updated in 2014.
Okay. We had an elder person that had been fighting a years-long battle for land of management review, I think was the name of the issue, and finally got to
Finally
reconcile.
won.
Finally won. It took years, so I don't want anything they can possibly undo.
No.
There were people compelled by flood insurance that
Yes.
were no different or worse than anybody else.
And
Yep,
the
all-
federal government was involved with that and the Wisconsin DNR, and they were just wrong.
2008 maps were off by 3 feet.
Yeah.
And that's what we went through the
Yeah.
process, and I think SCH was a big part of that.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
half of the city.
It took years.
So I remember that when I was at the county, because I did the floodplain stuff, and that did all get incorporated in the,
Just want to say with confidence that when anybody sees this in any
I know.
minutes,
Oh,
this is
yeah.
nothing. We're
No.
good. We're good.
no, and you can, and if anybody asks, you can go to the Waukesha County GIS and see all the draft maps, and if you toggle them on and off, you'll see where there's a change. Other than that, there's a list in the staff report of changes. To be honest with you, these are all, I believe most of these changes probably should have been in a previous version. They're not new per FEMA and DNR. They've had stuff regarding campgrounds and manufactured homes for quite some time. The one thing that is new is the state adopted Act 175, and that's the act a couple of years ago that gave relief on regulations for nonconforming structures. And although that doesn't have to apply to floodplain structures because the floodplain statutes are different statutes. The DNR is allowing communities to provide the same relief. Otherwise, it can get kind of confusing for applicants. And really what it's doing is it's taking away the requirement, if you so choose, to regulate based on the value of the structure. So improvements can be made up to 50%. You can make improvements up to 50% of the value of the structure before having to meet all kinds of requirements. Where now this is saying you can choose to adopt the 175, Act 175 provisions, which takes away the 50% rule. But if a structure is, needs to be repaired, remodeled, they would still have to comply with the minimum federal standards and then floodproofing standards from the DNR, but not the whole gamut of requirements. So I think in the packet, there's a summary of the Act 175 and how it's impactful to the city. I chose to create the draft that allows the Act 175 language because it's hard over time to manage value of improvements. And you know, it just, usually that gets lost in time. So the managing non-conforming structures based on the cost of improvements has gone away for all other structures except for floodplain structures. Unless you approve the ordinance with the Act 175 language, then it would also go away for floodplain structures. I think in Delafield, there's not much in the floodplain that is impacted. I mean, right, Scott?
No.
There's very little, structure-wise. So, adopting the model ordinance is the cleanest and easiest way to get through the DNR and FEMA requirements. You can adopt an ordinance that's different and unique than what they have. You just have to demonstrate and prove that you're meeting their minimum requirements. And again, your current ordinance matches the model. It's just been updated. Does that make any sense? Because I could get into all the little tweaks that I found, but you probably should have had this stuff in your ordinance already.
Anybody?
So can we pass that here? Does this go to council as well to?
Yeah, so there is a time limit on this. You're supposed to have these codes adopted in October. So I would recommend that you, if you're okay with it, I'll have to remove that section on official maps, that you recommend that staff draft an ordinance for common council review and approval, subject to attorney review. Unfortunately, the DNR drafted the ordinance for you, but then I had to renumber the ordinance to match the city's structure, which I did. And then she came back and removed the official map section and went back to her original numbering structure. So I've asked her to please use the ordinance I gave her and let me know if there's anything else that changed. That's why I would like it subject to attorney review, but it's a matter of getting the numbering correct, really.
All right, I'll make a motion to recommend that staff draft an ordinance updating Article 2 of the City of Delafield's floodplain zoning ordinance, consistent with FEMA and DNR, subject to attorney review for council's approval.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay, we're on to 12A, Planning Commission meeting dates and deadlines. Regular meeting will be September 27th, 2023. Regular meeting submittal deadline will be August 30th, 2023. I'll refer you to any correspondence that was in the packet. Then, Planner, do you have any additional comments?
Just one. Next month, I'd like to bring forth an updated land use plan map and zoning map. We've had a whole bunch of amendments over the last year and a half. That would be for you to acknowledge. You've already gone through the public hearing process and have approved several changes. It's just to acknowledge.
And then we'll get it posted and updated on the website and everywhere else. Okay, great, thanks. Mr. Building Inspector,
Nothing to report.
lots of plans in your office.
No, they're all out. Got them out. We are building in the city, so that's good.
Sounds good. All right, seeing no further business, we are now adjourned at 9:35.
Sorry.